So the last thing I want to talk about in terms of DeFi applications are innovative financing tools. Now, what these innovative financing tools are ways how firms or early stage firms, if you want, can finance their operations in ways other than going through an angel investor, venture capitalist, or anything else. So what they do instead is they do a token sale. Now, a token sale in many cases really means that you pre-sale some form of future revenue. Now it is a very complicated, there's many different ways how these tokens work, but the basic idea essentially is that you create a blockchain asset which can at some point be redeemed for something else. But the pre-sale of it allows you to give you the resources that you need in order to finance the investment that you need to make for a particular project. Now these tokens, or these initial token offerings, or sometimes called ICO, like initial coin offerings, were a huge thing in the late, sometime in 2017 and 18. So over a very short stretch of time, there was a total of $25 billion was raised for these early stage firms over just a few months, which is not a large amount in terms of total finance, but it was vastly more than the amount of venture capital issued over the same time horizon. And so it was a huge amount of money. For sure, it was more than most of a small stage IPOs. Now, this entire area has died down quite a bit, simply because most of these tokens were completely useless, right? There was no project underlying it. People had just made up all kinds of stuff, and most of this money was essentially lost. Now, just keep in mind, though, that most of this money did not come from, of course, a significant fraction of it came from normal people, normal investors, but a lot of it also came from miners that were just trying to diversify their mining holdings, their crypto asset holdings. So let's not get too excited about this. And let's also not get too excited about the fact that there was a lot of fraud involved. The more important question is there actually something to these tokens as a pre-sale of some form of good that could work? So just this is another number here. So in terms of comparison, right? So the Toronto Venture Exchange, which is probably the most successful junior market that exists in the world, has a total market cap of 41 billion, accumulated over 20 years or so. So the 25 billion relative terms was a lot of money. Now, the question though is, so now of course, so as I said, many of these tokens lost all their value, and people talked it's a bubble and a crash and scams and all that. There was a lot of that, and we can talk for hours over this. And in fact, if I had time, I could spend easily an entire lecture on this. But there's a bigger question here, which is the following: can these tokens actually work? Is there any merit to these tokens? Because what we do often in finance, when you think about what you learn in your classes, is you talk about debt and equity, and maybe sometimes people talk a little bit about royalties and leasing and loans and all. But ultimately, when we talk about issuing anything to the public, it's always equity, right? But these tokens are different. Most of them are not equity tokens. They're not an ownership part. There is no guarantee of some profit that comes your way. Oftentimes what they are is they're some form of it could be like a community item that has some value. But the best way to think about it, in my opinion, is that they are a pre-sale of revenue. So they can pre-sale either a fraction of future revenue, or they could be a pre-sale of tokens which are already giving you a particular service. And economically, this is a difficult problem. Now, I would be very happy to spend a lot of time on this. I've written a paper on this, actually, in a way to try to conceptualize what it is that we see. So, but the big point I'm trying to make is that there is now a host of economic research that says, okay, what is it that they do, and let's think this through theoretically. And so there's three major results that people have found. Number one is that it's possible to use these tokens profitably to finance projects that you cannot find with standard equity financing, or sometimes also not with debt financing. So they actually have, as a financing tool, can be much more effective than what we currently have in our arsenal. So that shows alone that these tokens can be conceptually a major innovation in finance. And they also show, there's other authors that show that these tokens can enable network effects and new business opportunities that otherwise would not be attainable when we just use, standard debt and equity financing. And finally, there's also some work which shows that for entrepreneurs, this is definitely something which could be useful because it allows them to extract potentially some more revenue or some more surplus that they would otherwise not be able to reach. So now you can argue whether it's a good or bad thing, but certainly it increases the incentive for entrepreneurs to engage in entrepreneurial activities. So in other words, what I'm trying to argue here is that there is a host of research, and I've not put the references up for these papers, but there's a host of research that essentially shows that these are innovative financing tools that allow us to do things that are otherwise not possible. Now, one of the things to keep in mind when we think of many of these tokens is actually how they're being organized in the tech stack of the blockchain. Now I have been teaching this for 2 years, and actually the Creative Destruction Lab, independently of my efforts, has taken over a similar way to think about blockchain tokens. And here's basically the idea. So when you think of a blockchain, and when you think of any technologies, there's usually various different levels, right? So there is, when you have an operating system, that is one type of technology, but nobody really buys an operating system. They buy an operating system because they can run applications on it, right? So you have Microsoft Windows is a base layer technology, and then on top of that you have the app that you can use. Now in the blockchain, the way to think about it is there's the infrastructure layer of a blockchain. So that's really the core blockchain, like Ethereum, for instance. And the tokens that are being issued there are some form of reward or internal currency tokens. Then you can think of a service layer. So what the service layer is effectively is a layer which uses the infrastructure layer in such a way that some ultimate applications that users use can be enabled. So an example is an oracle, right? So which creates information, takes information from outside of the blockchain, puts it onto the blockchain. And you can have a token for an oracle to operate. And then on the top layer, you have the application that you want. Let me say another example would be, for instance, Uniswap. Uniswap is a exchange, right, of particular items. An exchange application is an application that people who want to invest in particular tokens need. So, so what the top layer could be one which is investment advice, right, where people try to find the right services for, taking out loans and so on and so forth, which use the infrastructure layer. And so on the application level, you usually have some form of usage fee of the particular application that the users are engaged with. So also another way to think about the bottom layer is this is really what we talk about as the cryptocurrency, and anything on the service and application layer, these are all tokens, right? If you want to go with that.